Hello, this is Allie Decker, and you're listening to the Long Game Podcast. In this episode, I'm talking to Camille Trent. Camille is the head of content at Dooley, and Dooley is the first connected workspace for salespeople. It helps sales teams close more deals faster with better processes. Camille's content team works with all departments to create the best sales content and experiences on the internet. Before Dooley, Camille worked at Marketer Hire and has held various roles at agencies across the country. Join us for a conversation about building in public, transitioning from advertising to content marketing, and striking the balance between being a creative contributor and creative catalyst. Without further ado, here's Camille Trent. I'd love to hear, in your words, what your content journey has looked like. So it could be a career journey, but I know that some folks veer outside of content on their journey. So I'd love to hear more as it pertains to content and how you've gone there.
Yeah. So I think with marketing, it seems like nobody has there's no average path, right? It's just all over the place. But I do feel with content marketing, it tends to be more coming from journalism. That's just what I feel. I don't know if that's true. But mine was when I started college, they asked what I wanted to do. And I remember telling them that I want to do something with business and writing and art. Those are the three things. So I really didn't know, I think, what I wanted to do, but they were like, oh, that sounds like the advertising department. So I actually ended up doing the advertising track, which is in communications technically. And that ended up, I think, being a good career path because they had a specific track for copywriting. So did copywriting, but it was very much I would say it was not direct response focused. It was brand focused. The end goal was you're going to work for White and Kennedy. That was the goal. You're going to work in this big brand agency. You're going to make commercials, which was thrilling to me at the time. And so from there, I did get a good internship. I went to Martin Agency, which they do Geico and Oreo. They were doing all the fun stuff basically at the time. So yeah. I was I'm going to do this. And then of course, I got married in college, actually, the end of college. And so my husband ended up, he was going to get his PhD. And so was applying to schools when we were in Richmond for this internship. And so he ended up getting accepted at UTMB, which is in Galveston Island, off Houston. So so not super known for anything besides oil and gas and big tech, but ended up basically working at the biggest agency that I could find there, which their focus was very much B2B. And so ended up doing still in copywriting though. So I ended up getting a job in copywriting, but working for HP and Linksys and just very big, boring tech companies, doing just mainly boring things. But it was a really good experience. I felt the talent was really strong there at the agency level, both on the design side and the writing side. So learned a ton, learned a lot about technical writing because a lot of it ended up being technical things, right? You had to just learn the tech and be able to talk to tech. Yeah. So that was more of my focus there, was enterprise tech copywriting, I would say. It was how I started my career. And then later it wasn't until now basically that I've realized that a lot of what I was doing too was product marketing. I was working with the product marketers or product managers at HP and trying to understand what these new products were, what they were trying to launch and how we were going to explain these to people. Because really we were talking to DevOps and IT, really. And so, so I was really involved with their event launches. So they would launch their new products at these big global events. And because of that, it ended up being a lot of product marketing because it was positioning, messaging, around that, and the videos that to go with it and the assets. So yeah, but outside of that, still just everything under the sun in terms of there was still long form, but again, I remember doing something for Linksys that was more positioning of a bunch of research and a bunch of like positioning type things so we could get to the messaging part. Ended up being on a lot of like branding projects and stuff. So that's what I was doing there. I was there for like 3 years. Mainly just got super burnt out like on the hours and on the commute. Because I was also commuting like an hour there, an hour back.
Wow.
And yeah, and so I was like, I call it like my quarter life crisis, where I literally moved down to Galveston, which was where my husband was working, but there's like nothing going on in Galveston, like it's literally an island. And so, but I took just like a general marketing job there, like essentially like it was a marketing manager job, I guess. But I was in B2C and working at literally a fishing pier / restaurant. So it's like completely different, but I just kind of wanted to do something completely different and have like zero commute. And so that was actually really great. Got a dog, like walked on the beach. It was nice. But it wasn't like as fulfilling though. Like I wasn't doing as much strategy work, as a lot more execution work. And I'm just like more word minded, I guess, than like, than like visual, right? And so like a lot of B2C I feel like is visual, right? Like it's like the Instagram and it's like the TikTok and stuff. And so so that was just less appealing to me. Like it ended up being a lot more of that. And so I learned a lot that way and learned about social and also like community marketing, just like boots on the ground, like trying to like get college students to come too. So it was a good experience that way, to just work on marketing without a budget. And I should mention the other thing about this was like, I realized I was very specific. Like I was doing copywriting, but I wasn't doing any distribution work, right? Like I was like just doing for the most part, it wasn't a lot of SEO stuff. Like there were articles and there would be, I guess I wrote some websites and stuff, but we really didn't focus like on SEO. It was very like traditional agency. And so like I wanted to learn about that and ended up taking another job. Like I was at this B2C job for like 4 months. And then I took this other job that was actually at a like regional bank. And the marketing director was really smart, but he was also an IT director. And so it was like a lot. And so, anyways, but I learned a ton from him, like ended up doing like having to like run ads, but then also build our social following and also like writing articles like when I could and learning like a little bit of SEO there. And all this time I'm basically doing freelance writing too. So I'm like starting to sort of get clients like basically from the network that I had at the agency. And that's sort of like why I tell people to start an agency to begin with, to just like make friends and like work with smart people. But and so then around that time I just started what I call like building in public, of just like testing things online, like mainly posting on LinkedIn, and partly so that I could support like the sales team at the time. It was a very like sales led organization and wanted to show them that it would work, because something that's a service-based business can really benefit from that. So anyways, but then I ended up working like really well for me. And we moved up here to Denver. And in that time, like moved to a contractor in that job, like asked to move to a contractor position, took on more like freelance clients, thought I was just going to do that. Was just binging everything that I could, like SEO at that time. And I was like, I'm going to like turn this into like an SEO agency at some point, but I'll just start by just doing a lot of writing. So as a copywriter / like content writer. So and then around that time, when I'm like my following's like starting to build a little bit on LinkedIn, and I got like a few job offers or job opportunities, I guess. And, but wasn't really planning on like taking another job, but the one at Marketer Hire stood out because I would be able to support freelancers. And that's what I was doing at the time. Like I was like, I really know this audience, like, and I'm really passionate about helping freelancers. And then on the other hand, like just connecting marketers to freelancers. So because of that, and because of the role itself, and Tracy, whom I think is great, all those things, like I ended up taking that job. And learned a ton there, like got great experience there, thought I would stay there for a long time too. And then essentially just got this opportunity to like lead content. And so I felt like that was interesting to me. Had always been like my not always, but that had been my goal for like the past, 2-3 years. And
Yeah.
so because of that, and because of Mark's leadership, and the way that they built the brand, like there was just like a lot of hype, and they're building it social first, which is more my strength, or at least my like passion. It just ended up working well, I think. And so ended up taking that job.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So you have a pretty big copywriting background then.
Yeah, like I think that part might be a little like strange in that, again, most people start on like the content writing and like pure like journalism standpoint.
Mm-hmm.
And and I've noticed that like I have, I guess, more of an inclination to like insert the product, like, or insert like the mission, like into like everything that I do. So it can be like a blessing and a curse,
Yeah.
right? But
Yeah,
so
I'm
well.
so fascinated, like as I've grown in my own career, seeing and kind of tracing back people's experience, and not necessarily like their major, because I know college majors are what they are. They don't like dictate everything, but I see three main paths. I see journalism, like you said. I see copywriting, like agency copywriting, maybe freelance, in-house, and then I see like a true marketing background, which is mine. And so it's interesting how each of them, ultimately all three, are like the holy grail. So you have like product or brand mentions, you have someone who can come at it from like a thought leadership approach, journalism, good questions, and then you have a marketer who understands like content role and the funnel and conversions and all of that stuff. But one of my goals with this sub series is to really like figure out where people came from and if they think that it was a strength or not a strength. I don't want to say a weakness per se, but like if it played a role in where you are today, or you think maybe, do you think a different route would have gotten you to where you are better, or are you really glad with the path that you took?
Yeah. Well, I've thought like in retrospect, I think it would have been interesting for me to go like the marketing route. Like I remember thinking that in college, because my minor was sociology, and I ended up taking like a lot of the research classes through the ad program, and then also through sociology. So I was learning like SAS and like SPSS, so kind of like the data side, and like t-tests and like ANOVA, that sort of thing. So like the data side and the surveys was really interesting to me, and ended up being like a TA for the ad department, to teach them how to use Qualtrics, and like teach them how to like run that data, make it into a report basically, for the clients. And so that part was really interesting to me too. So I'm like literally like all over the board, and did that kind of same thing, as an RA in the sociology department. So there was a point like where I could either apply to the copywriting track, or I could just not apply. And then the default is either you do account management or you do account planning. And so account planning was really interesting to me from like the research side of things, but they really didn't have anything to support it. Like they didn't really have a track for it, if that makes sense. And so, so because of that, like it was just better set up to go the copywriting and route. And then also I still like leaned just creative. And that sounded more fun at the time. But now like I'm happy that I'm in like broader marketing, if that makes sense. Like I like having like the data and like the feedback loops. So I think just like finding SaaS and then also like startup world like has been a good thing.
So of all your work experiences, what's one that you never hope to repeat?
It's weird because it's like everything is helpful, right? Like it all helps to
in retrospect, yes.
In retrospect, yeah. But then things that like wouldn't do again. I'm not opposed to a lot of things, but this is going way back to college. So going to that like RA position of, I had one position where I was like doing qualitative data. So like going through surveys and like coding them by like the themes in there. And I was only doing that part-time. It was like 20 hours a week. And I was like constantly looking at the clock. Like I could not do that for 40 hours a week. So anything that's like a lot of like very data entry heavy is very tricky for me.
Yeah.
And then like I said, I think like B2B is actually more interesting to me, even though I thought it was stupid and boring like when I was coming out of college. It's actually pretty fun, I think, from the content standpoint. Like more fun, I think, in a lot of ways, because you're able to just get deeper, and like it's more about education and like explainer type content, rather than inspiration, which is still fun and good.
Right.
But yeah, I think that'll probably still like stay in B2B for a while.
Okay.
So those are the things that stand out.
Interesting what you said about B2B, because I've thought somewhat about maybe down the line switching to B2C, because I feel like well, not necessarily, but giving my work a little bit more tangibility, software versus products, might help. But you're right about, in terms of like the content when the spotlight's on content, there's just so much more of a playing field, I think, there. But anyway, thoughts on that. So thinking back to your whole career path, what are like the two, three main factors that you think directly contributed to becoming a head of content?
So someone posted the other day a poll that was basically like the best way is to land a job in 2021. And then their 4 like poll answers were like, optimize your LinkedIn, optimize your resume, optimize your cover letter, whatever it is, which are like fine and great, like do those things, but they're like a little hacky. And so I've just found that it's a lot of like building in public. So that was my like comment on that, of like just build in public, right? Because then you're able to show like what you're doing at your current job, and then also like what you're capable of, so you can get creative and do things that have nothing to do with your job. But with all those things, like you're able to show how you support like your current company, right? Like how like you individually contribute. Not that you have to like be on social to like be a good employee, but I think that does help to show like your value, I guess, to that company. But then also to show like, literally what you're doing in your day to day. So for instance, like a good example for me was, when I was creating content, sometimes I would start on social and I would say, like, we would have the direction of, we want to create the top tools for social media or whatever. And so we'd go to social media and just say, hey, like, what are your favorite tools? And have like 3 or 4 questions. And by the way, like, I'm going to pick like the best ones to be featured in this article that I'm doing. So now like they know that I'm writing this article and they're interested in seeing the article, and they're interested in being featured in it. And so, and this is, what most people do, like it works really well, I think, on Twitter too. But so doing that, and then like being able to use not use those people, but reach out to those people and say like, hey, this is live, and then they help broadcast like that piece of content. And so it just like gets better reach that way, and more people just know that you're doing it. So you're just bringing them along on your journey of creation. Like that's like a really literal example of like building in public, where you're building like a blog, and you're like sharing your progress around along the way, and you're turning it into maybe like a thread or something too, so different people can consume it a different way. So that's just an example of, I found that to be like a good repeatable motion of like, how can we get people involved in the content so that it's correct, like it's this like from the community, right? And then also just have them be excited like about the content that you're creating. So it's just turns into like a really nice like flywheel effect. So building in public is the short answer.
That's awesome. So I can imagine, as a copywriter, were you able to use a lot of your work as your portfolio, or did you kind of have to create your own portfolio by building in public?
Yeah, that's a good question. So a lot of the stuff in my first agency was under like NDA. Some of it like I still put on my portfolio. Like, I'm going to see this portfolio, for one, and then 2, like, what are they going to do when I've already left? So so there was some of that, but a lot of it, like I said, because a lot of it wasn't web-based. Yeah, sure. Because a lot of it like wasn't web-based, it was like just hard to capture what you're doing, right? And like your involvement in it. And so that's like another reason. Again, like I have a friend who's in sales, and that's his day job, but he's had like a copywriting side hustle for a while. And so I think, that's like the best way to do it, of you like think that you have this skill. And so, you're able to basically practice online, like just share your thoughts. And what he did were tear downs of ads, right? So he would see ads on LinkedIn, he would rewrite them, and explain like why his way was better, and kind of just let people decide. And so like their reactions or their comments would say like, oh, this is way better. And you do like side-by-side comparisons. So again, like that's another, to me, like good example of building in public, of like, he at first like didn't have the confidence because he didn't have the past experience and like the job. But there's a lot of overlap between sales and marketing, I'm finding, in an organization that is a sales SaaS company, right? And then now he, like, I feel like his confidence is like super, super high, to the extent where before he was asking about how he could break into marketing. And now he's like, actually, my business is going really well and I do really well in sales. So like, I think I'm just gonna keep doing this. And so like, that's the upside of, I think, having your side project and believing, not even like believing, but just doing it enough that you get the reps, that you are pretty good at it, and you can see other people validating that.
Yeah, that's really true. It's cool to see that building a public culture, whether you're an individual or a company. I think that's creates its own feedback loop and gives people a chance to work on things that maybe they wouldn't get to do in their day job without requiring them to change things up. So last question I have about your personal track so far: what things outside of content or content marketing do you think have contributed to where you are today?
The
fish house.
Sorry?
The restaurant?
The fish house. Honestly, yeah, it's been like across the board. So like success though. So I think the two things that stand out, like I gained like a lot from the different things. So maybe I'll just go through them. But at the agency level, like just basically seeing what good looks like. So for me, like seeing what really good design looks like, seeing what really good strategy decks look like, really good like pitches kind of like look like. You get exposed, I think, to everything that goes into content creation, even if it's outside of your zone, I guess, like even if it's not written content. So seeing that and being in just a lot of brainstorms with other creatives and other marketers, and just seeing how they think and how you fit into that, like how you can best collaborate. Like it was a light bulb moment for me, like when my boss at the time, I think it was like the director of creative services or something, was like, oh, you're really good like in a brainstorm, and so it's good for like the room though, and so like try to encourage like other people to do more of what you're doing, like of just having that confidence to like speak out about their ideas. And so he's like, basically, if you can just keep doing what you're doing and like pinball like off other people, then it makes them better, and then it makes you better, and it like creates that environment and stuff. And so that was, I guess, like an early on leadership kind of like lesson of how can you not be the person anymore, but be like the catalyst, like for your team. And so that was one thing that stood out. And then the other two jobs after that, again, were more like broad marketing. And so I think maybe a lesson was like figuring out what to focus on, because there's like endless things you could do. And if you're the only person, like it's easy to get distracted. But there's definitely things I could have done better there, things that I did do well. But it always comes back to like one or two campaigns that you remember, right? Like from past jobs. So like this was the thing like that I did really well there. So those are things, and also learning how to work on a non-existent budget, essentially. Like those are both small. Those are both like small companies, and so learning how to cut like what you're not using or what's not working too. I worked like directly for the COO at one point. And so that was like one lesson there of like, if I wanted something, like I'd have to cut something else basically, right? Or I'd have to like make a really good case for why we need to invest in it. And so bringing data into that was always helpful. And then I think just like this job and my last job, I think like the main thing was like just moving fast. Like they're both like series, I guess like seed, but essentially like Series A for marketer hire, and then barely Series B for Dooley. So like very similar places, and you're sort of like they say, building the rocket ship while you're flying it, right? And so being able to just go, and like not be too worried that like things are broken still, trying to like fix it as you go.
Yeah.
And then, just I think remote collaboration and teamwork. And again, like I thought Tracy was a great example of like good leadership. And so I think I learned a lot of things from there of like what I was doing well and what I could work on and stuff. And sometimes it's funny, like the feedback you get too of like what you think that you're doing, what you think that you're not doing well, and what you think that you are doing well could be like completely different things.
Yes.
Like I didn't think that I was organized, and she was like, oh yeah, you are organized and stuff. But communication was something that I thought I was like doing better that I like wasn't, because I just wasn't used to like a remote environment and having to like set everything like in Slack or in Airtable and stuff. So like flagging those is like things that I could get better at and stuff. So those, I think in a nutshell, that's probably a lot, but those are like the different lessons from different places.
So how have you translated your passion for like the brainstorm sessions into a remote environment?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I've heard like some different leaders like talk about this, like Dave Gerhardt. I remember him talking about like it's just hard to get like the team like pumped about something when you're just not in the same room and it's not that same vibe. But I mean, we're lucky at Dually, I think, because everyone's very like brand and like idea focused. I think anytime that you can use visuals like and links like back and forth to like convey what's in your brain, because a lot of times it's like really exciting to you and not work for someone else. I think anytime you can like bring multimedia kind of into it to like get the concept across, that helps. I'm not sure like what so like another thing is that when we'd have an idea for something, so we've done a lot of like what I'd call like product-led music videos. It's like my new term. But we've literally done like a lot of video and like music stuff and have people that are really passionate about that. So I think playing to the team's strengths is maybe part of it too, of like, that's not necessarily the first thing you think of when you think of content marketing, but also knowing that you have like the in-house talent of like someone who really loves doing sales reps, right? Like someone who really loves like doing video editing, and just kind of like not Frankensteining it, but just allowing like the conversation to go there and not like shutting it down, because it's not like traditionally what you do. So I don't know. So those are the first things that come to mind.
That's interesting. So digging a little bit into Dually, I know you've been there for about 2 months now.
Not quite. It's just like over a month actually.
Oh, really? Okay. So far, what can you say about the content culture? Like you just said, you all kind of incorporate some non-traditional things. And as head of content so far, I know it's been a short run, how have you either changed it or cultivated it or challenged it?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I'm trying not to zoom this back too far, but I was talking to a friend who's like an MBTI counselor, and so actually when I transitioned jobs, like I like went and like did that test to just better understand myself and like how I could support the team. And so like in that, I sort of like realized, okay, like I lead with this like creativity, like it's like technically NE, I think in MBTI world, but I like lead with this like brainstorm mentality, but that's like that's helpful, I think, for a contributor, but you use it in like a different way as a leader. So for me, it was like, okay, like my next two strengths are more like around, in some ways, like data and like organization and like refining something down, which can work well in copy, because it's like first you start with this like brain dump of information, right? Which is like my strength, and then but then you have like sort of like your editing brain, which is like my number 2 and sometimes 3 function of like just cutting, like refining until you're like down to like the really good stuff. And so that's like what's worked well, I think, like in brainstorm scenarios. So yeah, like I said, it's only been a month, but one of our like big initiatives was we had like gathered all these G2 reviews. We'd gotten all these badges and we needed to like let people know about it. Since we put all this effort into it. And so like in that role, like I was like, I need to play more of like a project manager role, like in most of like my day-to-day or most of these like brainstorms, especially because Mark, like our VP of marketing was out for like that week. This was like my third week. And so he's like, you're in charge, like make sure this happens basically. And so yeah, so it was like, okay, first day we talk about ideas, but we were feeling like really strongly toward one. And so I was like, okay, we're doing this one, like just being that person that's like, no more brainstorm, like we're just doing this one. And moving forward with it of like, okay, here are our next step plans. And you're doing this, you know what I mean? Like just being like the project manager, in a situation and stepping back, I think a little bit from like the creative side so that the team can like do that. Cause that's like the fun thing. And that's like what is going to fuel it. Like when it gets hard is that it's still like fun and creative. And so, so that was like a learning. And then also just how much of it is like hiring and systems. Like those are the top two, like priorities for me, like coming in. And that was sort of like the directive from my boss of like hirings are number one, like, systems, software, like that's our number two focus. And so there was one person like on my team at the time and only four people in marketing plus like a contractor. And so, but we're like rapidly expanding, like even before I came on, there are lots of like job descriptions up. And so for me, even before I came on, and then especially when I came on, it was like, what do you need to be successful? Like, how are you envisioning building out this team? And, and so like literally yesterday, we brought on our life cycle marketer. So here they're also like on my team for that, and bringing on like a front end developer and have a budget for writers and things. But that was different, right? Of having the focus more be on hiring and like systems and even reporting and data, like rather than the creative side. But also since we are like a very like brand focused, people come to us like for creative content, like making sure that I'm still doing that and like keeping that on track, but allowing the team to do more of the lifting there, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's interesting to hear the fact that those were initiatives like so early on. But I can imagine at Marketer Hire, you were a people manager first, correct?
Kind of. I was actually more of like an individual contributor because our marketing team was so small. So it was like, so we did have like a senior editor and then me as like the managing editor, but we really kind of like had our separate roles of like separate responsibilities. And then I did manage like an agency. So I sort of like lobbied to bring on an agency so it could repurpose some of our content for video. So that was helpful for like the webinar series, but I was more involved like in webinar and like social, and then also like long form SEO content. And then our senior editor was like literally like technical editor of everything. And also more of like the journalism pieces, right? So like the trend pieces,
Gotcha.
and case studies, like some case studies. She did a lot of things too. She's actually now like their editor-in-chief. So has like a very strong like journalism background, like very strong like editing background. So it worked out well, but it was kind of like an untraditional like way of going about it. And then right as I was leaving, like we were able to work with more freelancers to support the content team.
So now that you're in at Dooley, how have you balanced your like individual creative contributions, your background in being like boots on the ground copywriter, and then being that catalyst, the strategist? Like, how do you balance that? And do you find yourself drawn to one or the other, or does it depend on the project?
Yeah, well, I think that was why I realized that I liked and kind of like needed a startup environment,
Yeah.
because like you're able to like switch like
True.
task switch like quite a bit. But it's a great question because I am constantly like, should I spend more time on this, more time on that? So I think for me, it's like it's mostly just checking in and like aligning with the VP of marketing, which can be hard because he's also insanely busy, but being like, okay, what our number one priority is like for this week, for this month. And knowing that, for instance, for us, it's like signups, like driving signups. And so it is very like, to me, like more copy and like conversion and like relationship focused. And so even if some of that doesn't totally fall under content, like whatever I can do to support, for instance, our partnership lead, right? In creating content with partners, if we think that that's going to like drive more sign up. So just aligning it back to whatever like the North Star is for the team and focusing in that way. And so for me, like right now, it's again, like more on like that copy side of things, but also be starting to like refine those systems. And then like content is a little bit like on the back burner, like just because like that is our like setup right now. Right. It's very much like speed and like and like signups before long-term stuff. But another thing that I did was bring on an SEO consultant like pretty early. Like that was like, I had a specific person in mind. Like I knew we were going to be rebuilding the website. And so the technical aspects of that, not my strong suit. And so wanted to bring on someone that actually like could advise and like had the connections that we needed to like rebuild that site. Right. So I think like those to me were like making sure that like I communicated even before I took the job of like my strengths and weaknesses. And then also like bringing on like the talent that we needed from that standpoint to kind of like support these big efforts of like, redoing the site, for instance. But I think that's a fun part about it too. Like for this week, like I need to build that site structure, like run it by him and stuff. And so there's plenty of opportunities, I guess, to do things that in like a more specialized role might like, even if you're in content, would still like be outside like your comfort zone because it would go to SEO, right?
Right. There's a place for every little thing in the big organizations. I agree that small ones are pretty fun. So earlier in the call, you said that Dooley was a social first company, or their social first growth.
Yeah. So
what does that look like, and how does it impact, your role in content?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I think like a good comp for us, like a best case scenario would be like someone like Gong. So I don't know if you're like familiar with them or if you're on LinkedIn, but I'll start with that. So they started on like, I think a big thing for them like was LinkedIn 5 years ago. And like LinkedIn 5 years ago is probably like a pretty brilliant move. And so for me, recognizing that it's not exactly the same in terms of like opportunity. And also, I saw a lot of like success, I think, with SEO, like at my last company. Like I'm still, for instance, last week, like I'll go back and I'll look at Ahrefs and I'll see what like the best performing blogs are, and like seeing like, like seeing your own blogs like do really well there. And then when I was in the company, seeing actual like a decent amount of like conversions from that, like I still believe in it. And so like to answer your question, I think something closer to like the Gong world is like what we're doing right now in terms of we actually are writing blogs. And we have like a contractor doing that, but they're very like social focused. They're very like clickbaity, I guess. Like they're just like built for distribution on social, but it's working fairly well. And so like the next step of that is like that CRO component that they've done pretty well in terms of like content upgrades but mainly like they've been distributing on LinkedIn. And I think like Twitter would be like another thing that we'd maybe look at as well. But yeah, so it's not that they're not doing any long form content, but they are distributing on LinkedIn through posts. But then also there's a newsletter feature on there that lets you like drop your long form copy there. So they do that. They also repost that content on their blog. They use like their actual product data. So this is something I asked about when I like joined Dooley, and there's I'm still seeing like some ways to do it even before we have an analyst, but using like your own product data as a SaaS company to drive your content strategy and like your long form content, I think is pretty interesting. They've done all these things like really well. And so, so I think like something that's a little bit unique that we've done is one, like on our LinkedIn partner pages. So for instance, like a Sales Humor and Daily Sales have like 500 to 700,000 followers. Okay. And so early on, Mark did a really good job of making those partners to help like sort of our distribution engine. So we have like this opportunity to get in front of a lot of eyeballs, like, which is usually what a content team I think struggles with, is that distribution element at the beginning. And so then for us, it's like, okay, since we already have these things going for us on social and we have some buzz there, it's creating like the type of content that I would say like scrollers want to see, like in terms of like what that headline is and what type of content it is. And so for me, it's like, it's thinking about that and still testing if we do kind of like long form built for search type content, but then we post it through those partner channels, is it going to get the same engagement and the same traffic through there? So it's testing some things, but it's also optimizing the processes that we currently have of like when I'm working with our SEO consultant building out kind of like the search plan, will we be able to kind of like ship those things through social, or like work with our current consultant on the front end to get things SEO optimized, or is that something I'll have to do on the back end? So these are kind of just open questions, but I will say that that's worked fairly well, like in terms of the engagement and traffic we get there. And then we also do like a lot of like meme content. So a lot of like top of funnel sales meme content that again is still like product led might be strong, but like product adjacent, because for instance, like a lot of them are about Salesforce pains, like pretty specific. And like when you're like Salesforce updates, but you're and you lose your note or whatever it is, like it'll talk specifically to like these pains that salespeople have, and it'll get like really interesting engagement. I'm not surprised like how well they do, because we have kind of like 3 or 4 value props that are problems that we're looking to solve. And I guess this is the other part I'll mention, is that we brought on a product marketer around the same time that I came on, so like a month and a half ago. And that's been really helpful for me on the content side of like, he's now built out personas, he's like starting to build out positioning. And so for instance, yesterday, like I'm making like a little matrix where I'm pulling things from the positioning doc, and the persona doc, like about the common problems that salespeople are facing based on all these interviews that he's done. And then I'm able to chop that up and put it as kind of like a brief, like in things that I do with partners. And so like when I was meeting with our Sales Humor partner, for instance, who also like writes some of our blogs, like he was like, what are some of the common like problems that Dooly users face? And like, how can, because it's like, I can come up with memes and like, I know what good sales content looks like, but it just coming up with that stuff from scratch is really hard. Yeah. And so just being able to kind of give him like the matrix of like, these are the main problems, like these are how we solve it. I think will be easier for him to develop content, easier for us to develop content. So that's the other thing I would add, is like, there should be like a strong relationship between like the product manager and product marketer and the content team.
Absolutely. I love memes. I feel like, especially coming from like talking about pain points, which are super valid, but making them funny. People are like, yeah, I totally know what they're talking about. And then they click on it and find your brand and all that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's mainly a brand play, but I was looking yesterday at like the conversions, like from our referral links from our partner pages. And like some of those, like, it's funny, like some of those like do convert, and like and seeing like which blogs like convert to it's interesting. Like if you speak to someone like memes do really well, like they're like, oh yeah, that's my pain. Then that's a big part of it.
Yeah. And especially like we were talking about earlier, how big the playing field is for B2B, but most people approach that in terms of like format and not humor potential.
Yeah.
Because B2B usually doesn't have the same humor or personality that B2C does, despite how many types of content there can be. So it's almost like coming at it from a unique angle, it just automatically gets people's attention because they just don't see as much of that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I have a few more questions for you, just to wrap up. This one is my favorite. What is your most contrarian opinion about content marketing?
I feel like I actually published like a decent amount of contrary like opinion
on your LinkedIn.
Yeah.
Okay.
So maybe I'll try and like send some specific ones, but I mean, so I'll start with that actually, because my like most popular like post on there was basically like the analogy, just hit me one time of the analogy of like 2-in-1 soap, like or 2-in-1 shampoo, like never works. But we're constantly like, how can I find like the 20-in-1 marketer?
Yeah,
And so
I saw that one.
yeah, so that kind of like idea to me of, and I've struggled with this of like specialist versus generalist and what's like the way to go. And I heard someone on a podcast the other day, I can try and find it and send it to you, but talk about like the pie-shaped marketer, being like, so there's like T-shaped like this, and basically being like one thing that you like focus really well on. And then her thing was like, there should be a pie-shaped marketer that's like literally like the pie symbol, like 3.14
Oh yeah.
of there being sort of like 2 prongs, like of things that, and one that you're really good at and one that you're decent at.
Yeah.
And so now I've started thinking about it in terms of that of, for instance, for content, like the other 2 pillars, like that are really important for early stage SaaS is like product marketing and growth marketing. So figuring out like what my other one is, or like what would be like most beneficial, but kind of looking for like 2-pronged marketers. So that's more in like general marketing. I think for content marketing, something that's controversial for me is that I think most people are like content marketing equals SEO writing, and that is not true. So one, like I think you can be a great like content marketer without doing any SEO. Like I think SEO is a good pillar, and I think it's right for a lot of businesses. I think especially SaaS, like, but I think I've realized that service-based businesses actually like probably like don't always need like any SEO. And there's just other places that you can play. Like even if you were in content marketing and you were doing a lot of like sales enablement, and a lot of like landing pages, like that could be like a killer strategy for a team. And so I think sort of getting out of that focus of like, we need a blog, we need SEO to like do content marketing well, is sort of like controversial, because I think for a long time it's been like content marketing equals long form SEO writing. And if you can't do that, like you're not gonna do well in content. So
yeah, that was where my career started at HubSpot, and I had a very small introduction to the world of content marketing. And I feel like some people forget that SEO is a distribution strategy. It's not like the foundation of content marketing, but I agree with you there. I'd love to learn more about, how you educate yourself, keep your skills up, maybe what some of your favorite writers or online writers are when you do your self-education.
Yeah, sure. So I think from the copywriting standpoint, I like copy hackers. I think they do a good job like on their blog. And then what's her name? Joanna something.
Yeah.
I started taking like some of her copywriting courses just to like make sure I was like sharp on the more of like direct response copywriting. And then another one that I'm a fan of is Eddie. I think it's like Eddie Schlaner. I've talked to him a few times, like where I'm going to actually have him on my show soon. But I think he's done a really good job of just like really hyper focusing his career like on copywriting, and that being like his main thing. And it's really working out for him now, but definitely learned a lot of good, more direct response, like copywriting from him. And then I just read Chris Voss's book, which is Never Split the Difference. And so that's interesting because for me, like to create really good content, like you have to really understand the customer. And so that's more important than than to me like the fundamentals or like the style like of your writing, because if you are like living and breathing like, and it's hard to do that if you're not the market, right? Like before I was marketing to marketers, and I'm like marketing to salespeople, which is adjacent, but it's still a very different job.
Yeah.
And so for me, like, it's just kind of like reading some sales books, like listening to phone calls, and talking to customers. So like as far as research goes, like that's sort of untraditional, but yeah, I liked like Chris Voss's book. He was an FBI like negotiation, or FBI hostage negotiator. And so comes at it from that view. So it's still like an entertaining book. Like it's not like your boring business book, but really, yeah, I was trying to figure out like, what's the type of content or like the types of things that I need to learn to be able to educate salespeople effectively. And that's kind of like a hard gig, because I feel like them especially, like they don't, I could just be making this up, but I think they don't respect people as much, like if they haven't been in the trenches, right? If they haven't literally had to like do direct outbound. And so sort of like learning those strategies for myself, like even doing them right now, like with my podcast, of having to do some outbound, and having to like feel that.
That's so true.
So like those sorts of things, like finding the parallels, like what's the overlap between like my experiences and like a salesperson's experiences, but also extending those, like putting myself in uncomfortable situations so that I kind of like more feel the pain like of a salesperson. So another thing early I did was just sign up for like our product when I started, and like getting in there and like using it and stuff, figuring out like now getting like a Salesforce seat. And so all those things have been helpful for me, but reading the types of books that your customers would read, like whether that's a business book or if it's like an inspirational book, trying to sort of like do some, what I call like method marketing there, just like method acting.
That's fascinating. And I love how it doesn't, like that approach doesn't just like double or triple down on like tactics and skills as it pertains to content. So I feel like people, whatever industry they're in, they get to just diversify what they're learning because they're speaking to all these different kinds of people. Because I feel like when I ask this question to other content marketers, they have some good answers, but it all pertains to content, like just content in and of itself, and not why or how you're writing it and what the purpose serves in the larger business goals. So I love that answer. Nice. As we wrap up, I'd love for you to share how people can find you, where you are online, and if anybody wants to follow up afterwards, how they can reach you.
Yeah, sure. So Camille Trent, I am on Twitter, but I'm not super active there, but it's just at Camille Trent. And then LinkedIn is probably the best place that you can find me right now. Also just Camille Trent should come up, head of Duly, if that's harder to find. Yeah, I could say those are the main two places.
Awesome. Well, thanks for joining us today. I really love chatting.
Yeah, absolutely.